Sunday, let me start again. Super Bowl Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. Glad to be here. Tonight's episode is named Triggered Imprisoned Angel. Got to tell you, I'm excited about this one. Of course, I'm excited about every broadcast that we do, but this one, hits close to home. It's a topic that is discussed in at least this household, but also my mother, who is in heaven, I believe, based on my spiritual beliefs. She talked about this all the time. It was a big thing in our family, and in fact, my brother-in-law, Kyle, he hates the word triggered. He doesn't think anyone should be triggered, and he doesn't like the word, and he calls it psychobabble. When people say it, he gets triggered. So it's funny that you don't like something, but yet you're reacting to it, and you say that you're not triggered. Well, I'm not triggered. I just don't like that word. Well, why are you reacting then? Anyway, we'll get into all that, get into the description and all that. I just wanted to share right at the beginning that this is a topic that hits close to home. And
in many ways.
In many ways. There she is.
Many ways. Hello.
Well, let's get right to it. Since you're first, Jen, go ahead and say hello to the peoples.
Hey, peoples. We got Debbie. I'll just say hello. Okay, it's Sunday. It's Pooper Bowl Sunday.
Pooper Bowl. Okay.
Pooper Bowl.
I like it.
And glad to be here. I just woke up from a nap, so I am a little discombobulated, but I am here. Yay! And just very glad to be here. And I'm really excited about this topic as well.
Yeah.
Since I have a lot of intimate, what's the word? Not knowledge. Well, I guess knowledge. Yeah, intimate knowledge with being triggered.
Knowledge. Sure. I think
Especially
all of us have.
Recently. Yeah.
I think all of us have, whether we define it as that or not. I mean, it is my observation. It is a reaction that people have. When people get angry or they get happy. Either way, and I don't want to give anything away yet. There's definitions of both. It's not all negative. We'll dive into that here in just a minute. And we'll say hello to our friend from Australia, Glenn. Glenn, say hello, please.
Hello, please.
Hello, please.
We're all in rare form tonight.
Hello,
watch out,
please.
People. Yes, I'm doing the show under difficulties. I have only got one computer screen.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
What a pain.
You're a trooper, Glenn.
It is a pain.
Such a hero. Oh, give me validation.
You are.
I don't wanna.
Okay, see ya.
Oh, no.
Oh,
hey,
wow.
Hey, now.
Wow. See how it feels, man?
Yeah.
She says, I don't wanna.
I'm hurt, wounded.
You're triggered.
I'm going home.
Hey, now.
I am home.
You're triggered.
It's hilarious.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Okay.
Thanks.
Wow.
I'll be here all week.
Yeah, that's right. You will be. All right. So, as many of you know, today is Super Bowl Sunday, and we decided to have a broadcast either way. While millions of people are sitting in living rooms and bars all over America, and I'm assuming people outside of the United States watch football as well. But it's generally an American sport. Football in other countries is generally soccer. So there you go. There's that you can argue about. But here in America, Super Bowl Sunday is a big deal. NFL football, and the Rams are playing the Bengals. The Bengals, who have not been there in quite some time. The Rams had a nice little run a couple times back in the 90s. So neither one of them have been there for a while. I'm not a sports statistician, so I wouldn't be able to bring up the years, how long it's been. But I do know for the Bengals, it's been well over 30 years as far as I know. So I used to be a big football fan, and then I got a life. And that's not to say if you like football that means you don't have a life. I'm just talking about myself. I was very involved in football, and there were other things I could have spent a lot more time and probably should have spent a lot more time paying attention to, but didn't. So, Nez Lover says, I say no. I say no to Satan Bowl. There's the first comment on the board for tonight. Satan Bowl. Yeah, that's a topic for another night. But yeah, I mean, it's all about money and distracting people, in my opinion. But there it is. People are enjoying it, millions. And then Glenn mentioned, and he's absolutely right about this, the amount of how much it costs to have a short commercial in there. It's just ridiculous. I mean, but
astronomical,
yes, but people will pay a lot of money for that because they know they call it eyeballs. We got a lot of eyeballs watching, and that's true. Lots of eyeballs.
That's kind of gross.
Yeah, but that's what they call it. It's eyeballs. It's a advertising term. So there you go. I was telling Glenn that I don't bother to watch the Super Bowl anymore. But if the Detroit Lions ever made it, I would watch it, and probably Carolina Panthers. It would be enjoyable, especially if the Lions, because I grew up loving the Lions and their underdogs, and I like the underdog. So tonight, the underdog would be the Bengals. Not that I care, but of the two of them, the one that they choose to win, I hope that they choose the Bengals to win.
You sound like you care a little.
Care a little?
Yeah.
Does it sound like I care a little? Okay.
Just a little.
Maybe a little. When you talk like this, you can't be mad at me.
Oh,
I didn't
man.
wake you up. I didn't know I was supposed to wake you up, and you were late. Me too. Didn't know it.
Okay. I'm gonna die.
Okay. All right, guys.
I'm crying.
We're gonna get started here. So, if you could take a minute, say hello to everyone in the chat, and we'll get going. We don't have.
All right.
I guess a few people, at least tonight, are watching the Super Bowl because they're not here.
Maybe I judge you. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I judge you, right?
So we have Debbie, we have Nez Lover, we have Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ here. Celine is here. Hey, Celine. We've got Glenn in the chat.
Yeah.
We have Mike, the Nut House. And I think that's it so far.
Oh, by the way, Mike, I was not able. Obviously, I didn't make it to your broadcast last night, so I apologize for that. I didn't even see the email until after the fact. I was very busy this weekend. I think I've started a new job, and I still have the other two jobs that I'm doing. And just so happened I had a project this weekend, so I've been putting a lot of time into that. And yeah, so I've been really, really swamped this weekend. So. I'm sure you understand, Mike, and hopefully I can make it to the next one. But if you guys haven't gone over there, if you like that sort of humor, go and check it out. It may not be for everyone, but I think it's funny, and Mike's a good friend, and he pops in when he has a chance. So that's the Peanut House. So I'm sure if you pop it in the YouTube search, you'll be able to find it. So go over there if you get a chance. I also went over to Nez Lover's YouTube. Some very interesting things on there. She's a very talented person.
Me too. I checked it out.
Yeah, lots of art stuff, art-related things, and some videos that she put together. I think she did it herself. So, yeah, very creative. So go check it out. Yeah, Mike, I understand. You're at work, right? He's at work, and he pops in and pops out. Yeah, completely understand. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it. I hope you're having a good day at work. Well, welcome to everyone who has taken the time on Super Bowl Sunday to stop in and say hello and listen to our broadcast. If you're listening to the playback, thank you for stopping by. As well, if you could do us a favor and hit the like button for us. And if you haven't subscribed, please do that. And the biggest thing you can do is tell other people about the broadcast. If you enjoy anything about it, just please do that for us. We're happy with the people that do come and show up and come to the chat and all that, but we would like to have more people, because the more people we have, the the more discussions that we can have. And we love discussions on this show. That's what we do. We're just talkers. We just talk about topics and kick things around, and that's kind of the way we roll here. All right, so we're gonna dive into this. So this is the second week in a row that Glenn has done a write-up. I definitely was too busy, and Jen is working on one, and it's a very important topic to her, and it's still in the works. But when it's done, we will do that broadcast, and everyone will be delighted to hear what she has to say about ego. That's kind of what the topic is. Am I right, Jen? It's about ego?
Yes.
There you go.
And many of you out there might think, I don't have an ego.
Ooh.
Well, there is also the opposite of having an inflated ego, which is a deflated ego.
Deflated ego.
I had no idea. And so that's kind of where I've spent my life, in the deflated place.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting topic.
So both are bad. Inflated or deflated, both are bad. Like everything else, I keep saying try to have a balance. And I think most things, that's helpful. There you go. All right. So that's coming up here in a little while. But thank you to Glenn for doing this write-up. And when I read it, Jen and I read it together. She actually read it to me, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is really, really good. So here we go. Starts with a quote, as usual. Everything you do is triggered by an emotion of either desire or fear. Brian Tracy. Thanks, Cripps, for highlighting the relevance of tonight's topic. In the context of this evening, the Cambridge Dictionary defines a trigger as, quote, something that causes a strong emotional reaction of fear, shock, anger, and worry in someone, especially because they are made to remember something bad that has happened in the past, end quote. I believe this to be a narrow definition, but certainly one to build on. Tonight's music is Imprisoned Angel by Mattia Turzo. I'm sure I botched that pronunciation of that, but the link is in the description. I listened to it a little earlier today. It's very, very moving. So give that a listen when you get a chance. Another quote, your emotional triggers can teach and grow you, or they can keep you stuck in the same old shit. Undetermined. My apologies to anyone that doesn't like that word, but there it is. I believe most people have at least an inkling of what might trigger them, but as always, there are questions. If I know something is triggering me, how might I identify what is the root cause? Wow, right out of the gate with a great question. If I don't know something is triggering me, how might I identify that my actions and responses are potentially the result of being triggered? How does my response to a trigger manifest? Example, do I get upset, withdrawn, ignore, etc.? How do I explain my trigger to someone who is in my firing line and has no idea what might be happening? Wow. We hear in cases of PTSD, etc., that trauma and stress can manifest at any moment. This is way outside of my frame of reference, hence I can't imagine what it is like to live within that personal prison. One thing that comes to mind is Syria, which is a beautiful country with wonderful people. Many of those things we experienced are now gone forever, smashed beyond recognition. The people are smashed. What can one say? This makes me think many of our so-called issues are overblown by the reality, but the reality is they are real and cannot be compared. Okay, sometimes I think to myself, why can't people just move on, get over it? But it really is none of my business. We each handle things in different ways. It is what it is. Obviously, there are varying degrees of being triggered and varying degrees of responses. It is my hope that stories on this topic will be revealed tonight for all to hear and potentially relate to. I wonder, is imprisonment taking it too far? Just how widespread is it that people are captive of their personal triggers? Let's look at some negative triggers first. Some examples are feelings of being neglected, ignored, manipulated, disrespected, judged, and unsafe. Being always the one at fault, the one blamed. It's too hard. I can't be bothered anymore. There are more others than I can count. The same question keeps reappearing. I'm triggered. If I don't want this trigger to rule me, what am I going to do about it? Great question.
Mhm.
Perhaps the solution to the trigger is not so simple when, another quote, it's funny how sometimes the people you'd take a bullet for are the ones behind the trigger. And that's by Prashant Chaudhary. Probably botched that one as well. Prashant Chaudhary. You know, Glenn, I really appreciate the write-ups, but let's try to get some quotes from people whose names are easier to.
I think he likes to hear you try to say it.
Yeah, I think so too. The point is, things can get even more complicated when the situations involve those we love or are supposed to love. How does one deal with interactions when the trigger comes from the close-knit of family, siblings, partners, friends, etc.? It is a hard call, knowing as children we may have been so affected by those close to us that now as adults we may have to consider breaking close bonds. It is sad to contemplate that this may be necessary for emotional survival. Whew. We don't end tonight's broadcast in a state of exhaustion. The good news is there are positive triggers. Perhaps we don't pay enough attention to them. I have many. They are not driven by fear, but as the quote says, by desire. The Cambridge Dictionary defines desire as to want something, especially strongly. I cannot deny that when I watch Japanese videos on YouTube, I am triggered. I can smell the green tea in food, and I am ready. Pandemic patience required. I am relying on Cripps' hosting skills to get some positive triggers put on the table. That should be enlightening, regardless of whether we look at the negative or the positive. Another quote, even the largest avalanche is triggered by small things. Werner Ving. There you go. I got that one. Sounds to me like Coco getting excited when I say the word chicken. LOL. That's great.
Wait,
Oh,
where did he say chicken? Or was that an innuendo of about something else? Am I completely losing it?
no, I don't think you're losing. So the quote is even the largest avalanche are triggered by small things. Sounds to me like Coco getting excited when I say the word chicken. So he says the word chicken and Coco gets excited. It's a avalanche triggered by a small thing.
Okay, I thought he was saying something
I
else.
think he can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way I took it. What do you think? What do you think he was saying?
So at the end it says, I'm relying on Cripps' hosting skills to get some positive triggers put on the table. That should be enlightening. So I thought the chicken part was an innuendo to you. Like, are you going to be are you going to be a chicken?
No.
Or are you going to have some good hosting skills and get some positive triggers on the table?
Gosh, let's hope.
Jen, that is way too deep. I'm a simple person. I'm thinking about the cat.
I'm so triggered.
I'm a little triggered, Jen, that you would think that Glenn would think that about. Think that I would be chicken to come up with some.
I'd be more subtle, Jen. Give me credit.
Okay, I'm triggered. Let's go on.
A little bit more subtle. Yeah. Oh, wow.
It's too deep. Okay, I'll save it for the questions. Not the write-up, Jen.
This is going to be a fun playback to listen to.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so guys, the music is really good. Give that a listen. Click the link when you get a chance. We're going to dig right in. I have a lot to say about all this. So the quote before the questions says, I believe most people have at least an inkling of what might trigger them, but as always, there are questions. So I love the way Glenn got the definition of trigger, from the big Cambridge dictionary. But I agree with him completely that it's not just negative triggers, and I can't wait to get to that point because I have plenty of examples. So don't worry, I can think, and I'm sure you guys can think of things. If you look at it, I mean, you may not agree that it's desire necessarily. I think it's a fine definition. There are clear negatives and there are positive ways that you can be triggered. You can be triggered by smell. Glenn's example was, watching videos of Japan. He could taste the tea and the food, and I'm sure you can, in his mind, he can see the cherry blossoms and the water and the people and just a lot of it. And we all have triggers like that. In fact, I can't think of the name of it. Maybe Jen, but smells trigger us to memory. They've done research about this. So it's like remembering a smell from when you were a kid and you smell it again, and that memory comes running right back into your head, and you can almost smell it right there, and you may be far away from anything that even smells like that, but there it is in your mind. It takes you back. It's like a little olfactory time machine, so to speak. So that's a trigger, just like anything else. It doesn't have to be anger. All right. So first question after the quote: if I know something is triggering me, how might I identify what is the root cause? And yes, I'm going to start with Jen on this one because this is good. I want to see what she has to say about this.
Say it one more time, please.
Sure. If you know something is triggering you, how might you identify what the root cause is? So if you get triggered, how do you figure out what's causing it?
Okay, so I was majorly triggered the past 2 weeks.
Oh.
And it's interesting to look back on because it's like this winding journey to figure out what is the root cause.
Sure.
And for me, it was really interesting. Hopefully you guys don't mind that I go into this for a few minutes. Part of it was some altercations I had 2 weeks ago, and someone talked to me like my ex used to talk to me. And I haven't been talked to like that in over 3 years. So it kind of snapped me back into that memory, all the memories. I mean, thousands of memories. It's just like, now, even though I handled it good and my mind was okay and even my emotions were okay, my body was freaking out. My adrenaline dumped, my heart was racing, my breathing picked up. And then the whole rest of that week and weekend, I was in so much pain, guys. And which was weird because I was like, great. Again, emotionally, in my mind, everything, I was great. And it was kind of like my body wasn't listening to me. I was like, calm down. But just a few days ago, Thursday night, Jason and I were talking. And I think there's a lot of things attached to this particular trigger for me. But in this God-ordained moment of Jason and I talking, I realized that I, at some point in my marriage, had separated from my body. And I don't mean disassociation. I don't mean what do they call that when you go floating in the galaxies when you're asleep? It wasn't astral projection or
there you go, you got it.
anything like that. But I got to a point, in order to survive in the situation I was in, it was like it's almost like I pictured my body as this separate person, and even took on my abuser's mentality toward my body of getting angry at it, getting frustrated, getting irritated, because my ex he was not okay with me being hurt, having PMS, being sick, needing to sleep. Just things that, just happen to us when we're humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of picked up his attitude toward my body.
Right.
And, but then in my healing process, there was some positive notes to me looking at my body as a separate entity, if you will, in the healing process. But it's gotten to the point where, and I don't know if any of you guys in the chat have read about or heard about reintegrating, like when you have people that have split personalities, you have to integrate with them in order to come into being one again.
Mm-hmm.
And so this moment that I had with Jason when we were talking, I realized that I was referring to my pain as my body's pain. And it seems so simple, but it was so huge for me to make I statements instead of my body, my neck, my stomach. Just I don't know if that's making sense, but
Yeah, you are making sense. I knew you were going to get there because you're talking a
Yeah.
lot, which is great. I love it. Don't
Cool.
stop. But yes, you're
Okay.
making sense.
So as I was sitting there, I started thinking I statements and saying, this is my pain.
Yeah.
I was abused.
You're taking ownership of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even in the simplicity of it, it blew my mind. And I could almost feel it happening where I was finally acknowledging that my body is me. And again, this may sound super weird and whatever, but that's okay. But yeah, so in just realizing that, I was triggered by being talked to a certain way that no one's talked to me like that in a long time. But being stuck in the pain that I was feeling physically was relieved finally by me taking ownership of my body and realizing all those years it was me that was hurting. It wasn't my body. It wasn't some separate person. It was me, and that was just huge for me. And it's funny because this whole 2 weeks I've been like, I need a new pillow and I need a mouth guard because I'm clenching my jaw muscles and I need this and I need that and da da da. And I'm like going on this detective journey trying to figure out what's going to help me. And it was something as simple as that. And it was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That might be the first of all, that might be the longest time you've talked
Nice.
on the broadcast. So that was really nice. That was a nice little treat. Thank you for being transparent enough to share that. And I don't think it's weird at all. I think it's very understandable, and it doesn't have to be. So you talked about integration. There are so many people out there that need to integrate their body and mind. It's not just your situation, Jen. I don't think at all. I think that
No.
people close themselves off from their emotions. They close themselves off from their spiritual side all the time. And it doesn't just happen to believers or non-believers. It's people that struggle with this.
Yeah.
You see it a lot with people that experience, as Glenn mentioned in the write-up, PTSD or CPTSD. They have experienced a lot, and they're feeling the triggers or the effect of the abuse that they went through, or in the case of seeing war, going through the trauma and the tension that their bodies took.
Yeah.
I'll tell
I want to say one more thing when you're done.
Oh, why don't you go ahead? Because it's going to be a minute.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, darn it, did I lose it? When Jason and I were talking, I had my eyes closed because he was saying some really wonderful things. And it was almost like, with my body being in my mind a separate entity because I had disassociated to survive, the way I had been treating myself, my body, was like a friend coming up to me and sharing their pain with me, and me getting angry at them and pushing them away.
Yeah.
And so, again, I was reacting to my own body, like my ex, and that grieved my heart. I was just like, oh my gosh, like I do not want to treat myself that way.
Yeah, it puts it in perspective. Yeah, sorry.
So that was huge as well. But you go ahead.
Oh no, I don't need you to be done. I just I was saying you put it in perspective.
Yeah. In a perspective I could understand, because I had no idea I was doing that. I really had no clue. So when you said, you can't imagine how many people are going through this that have done that have separated from a part of them, to survive or to not deal with triggers or, whatever, that grieves my heart because I didn't know. I just had no idea.
Yeah. That's the thing. And that's perfect timing, Jen, because it goes into the story that I want to tell. And I just happened to hear it last week. I didn't even know Glenn was going to be talking about triggers. But we listened to a show called Mr. Ballin, Ballen. And it's hard to describe what that show is. Jen, how would you describe that show to someone that had never seen it, Mr. Ballin on YouTube?
It's a guy who narrates stories. He's a storyteller, and
Yeah.
a lot of it's crime, paranormal, real life stories.
Yeah.
He does a lot of stories of you wouldn't believe it was true,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
unless you heard it, or
Yeah.
and he's
Places you shouldn't go, but people actually do,
yeah,
things
yeah.
like
So
that.
it's good.
Okay. Thank you for that, Jen.
Are you going to talk about what you showed me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm so glad. Good.
Okay. Yeah. So on one of the most recent episodes on Mr. Ball, he was telling a story about a guy who had gone in for some kind of like a gallbladder operation or something like that. So he goes into the hospital and they're getting him prepped for surgery and all that. And the anesthesiologist goes in, and they're supposed to, from what he was saying, from what I understand, is supposed to give you two different drugs. One is for the pain, and the other one is to knock you out. And one of them also is a paralytic. So it paralyzes you so you don't move while they're doing intense surgery, and you're supposed to be asleep. You're not supposed to be awake for it at all. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear enough, Jen, do you think? Okay.
That's clear. Perfect.
So the anesthesiologist made a mistake, though. They gave him the paralytic, and he gave him just the paralytic. Not the drugs to numb the pain, and not the drug that put him
Knock him out. Yeah.
And they put the mask over him and told him
taped his eyes shut.
Taped his eyes shut. Yeah, it's a good thing to add. Thank you. Taped his eyes shut, so he couldn't do anything with those. And told him to count backward from 10. And of course, they always know that the person's going to be asleep before they ever get to 0. They're going to be out and ready to go. So he's counting backwards, got his eyes taped over, and he found out he was, paralyzed and he couldn't move. And he wasn't asleep. The anesthesiologist did not anesthetize him at all. So he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. It affected his voice box and all that. He couldn't cry out. He couldn't move his arms or anything. All he could do is move his eyes back and forth. He could move his eyes from left to right. So, and he knows everything that's going on. He can't see it, but he can hear people talking. And he keeps moving his eyes back and forth. And as he's doing that, the tape came loose a little bit. He had a little slit where he could see. And he could see the doctor, the nurse, hand him a scalpel. And the guy, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of details. Some people might be triggered by how violent this is. But they start operating on this guy. They cut him open with a scalpel, and he felt everything. He felt absolutely everything. And I think it was 16 minutes that they operated on him to take his gallbladder out, and all the cutting and the section. The guy does it way better.
They put a camera in him and to do some exploratory. Oh my
gosh. Clamping the skin to the sides and just all the stuff. And he could feel everything. And then somewhere toward the end or before they were done, one of the nurses happened to notice that the tape had come off his eyes, and they could see that his eyes were open and he wasn't asleep. And she yelled, "Stop, stop, stop, stop." And the anesthesiologist was in the room apparently, and they called him over and they said, "What in the world's going on? He's not asleep." And he realized in that moment that he forgot to give him the other drug. So they pump him full of painkillers and all of that. And they finished the operation, all that.
Oh, they also gave him an extra.
I was going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you tell that part?
No. You go ahead.
I wasn't being sarcastic, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you know.
I wasn't triggered, just so you know.
Okay, yeah, good. That's good, just so you know. Sorry, this story is so long, but I've got to fill time here. So they give him this. They talk about it while he's out, and they agree that if he wakes up, he's going to remember all the pain that he went through, and he's going to know that they messed up. The hospital messed up. And as terrible as this is, they agree to give him a drug that will make him forget. Now, I forget what the drug is called, but they give him this drug so he doesn't remember what happened. And sure enough, comes out of surgery, everything went fine. Tell his wife, oh yeah, everything is great. And sure enough, the guy didn't remember the pain that he endured, the intense 16 minutes of pain, no anesthesia, no painkillers, while people explored inside him and did this operation. So Glenn said in the chat, sounds like a lawsuit coming. There was no lawsuit because the guy he had no memory of it. He didn't know what was going on. So here's the point. Years later, he's with his wife, and just in the middle of the day, he starts screaming. And his wife said he never acts like this. He's never reacted to anything. This is not something he does, but he just kept screaming. And he started saying weird stuff like, don't leave me. They're going to kill me. He was saying things like that. And he was just unreachable. She tried to, held onto his arm and was like talking to him, trying to get him to snap out of it, but he wouldn't snap out of it. He just screaming. Eventually he came back to himself and he was fine again, but they couldn't figure out what it was. So this is a long story. Go over and watch it. I don't do it justice. He's a way better storyteller, at least with this type of content, than I am. But I'm getting to the point. So the guy ended up killing himself. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. Why he was having these more than panic attacks. But what it was, in my opinion, based on everything I heard and based on what I've observed, is that he was triggered by something. Something triggered that his body remembered. Even if his mind didn't remember, there was a part of him that could not forget the trauma that he felt. So this is the perfect example. Even if we don't mentally remember, or we know why we're having a visceral reaction, emotional or spiritual reaction to something, our body freaks out from time to time. Sometimes we have anxiety attacks. People always say, well, I wasn't in an anxious situation. I was fine. And I have this anxiety attack, or I have a panic attack that come up out of nowhere. You're not in a panic situation at all, but yet your body is reacting as if you are. These are examples of being triggered. And when people are not aware of what is at the root cause of the trigger, then this can go on for a very long time. And the longer you don't deal with whatever it is that's triggering you, the more devastating it can be. Probably not to the extent of this guy, but I thought it was a good example. Glenn says, I'm exhausted from that. I'll put that on there. There it is. Glenn's exhausted from that. Sorry, Glenn.
Did you see my post under his?
Yeah, there it is right there. Oof. Need some triggers of desire, Glenn. Japan. I love it. Yeah. All right. So Jen's story was a lot better, but the basic point of all that is that we all have triggers, and if we can find out what the root cause, that's a good idea. So I'll go next. If I know something is triggering me, how am I to identify what the root cause is? Now, for me, this is second nature. I have been thinking about this and reacting to this for a long time, because sometimes it's true. I'll feel a reaction to something, and I'll often judge my own reaction and say, well, that really didn't fit the situation. I'm feeling more angry than what just happened should make me feel. Now, I'm judging that because I have a certain standard that I like to go by. I set my own standard. So in other words, if I'm acting really, really angry and what just happened, I judge as not being worth the anger that I'm putting into it or the feeling that I'm having, then I know it's a trigger. I know it's from something else. It's not the situation itself. It can't be. It's just what triggered it. So my mind immediately starts working on trying to figure out what the core is. So when something comes up, I get a feeling, I automatically ask, okay, what is this really about? I mean, even if you don't know about triggers, you hear this all the time when people react. They're like, well, you can't be. What's causing you to react like this when the reaction seems misplaced? Doesn't seem like it fits the situation. Well, it can also be somebody's a narcissist and thinks that everything you do and say is over the top. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about in general, your reaction doesn't seem to match the situation that caused your reaction in the first place.
Yeah.
So there you go. So I identify the root cause by looking at the feeling, and then sometimes it's a quick thing. Sometimes I know why I'm triggered by a certain thing. I'll give you an example. I started a new job, and when I start something that I don't know what I'm doing, and it's something new or there's a lot to learn, I already know that I'm going to get quote unquote triggered by it when I don't have control over the situation, and and it's from my childhood. It's from having a critical father who always seemed to think that I should know how to do everything right out of the gate. And after having worked for him for a long time, I started treating myself like that. Much like Jen said with dealing with her ex-husband, she started treating her body like he treated her. Everyone remember she said that? So I believe that's something that we all do. We all have the capability of doing that. So I do it to myself. Now it's gotten better. I've been aware of this particular trigger for a long time. So when I start something new that I don't know what I'm doing, and it's a complex situation, I prepare myself that this is going to be a little bit more difficult. Now, this past time, over the past 2 weeks, it's been a lot better than other times in the past, because I think each time, if you're aware of what's going on and what's causing it, what is it, the root cause, then you get better at dealing with it. And
yeah.
I wish that for everybody. So I think I've said enough about this one. I'll move on to Glenn, but there are processes that you can use to do this. I'll say one more thing. When the way our bodies are designed, whether you believe it's evolution or whether you believe it's God, the fact is, Jen, have you ever gotten a splinter in your finger or on your hand or anywhere? A splinter?
Yeah.
And some of them you can grab with a pair of tweezers. It's, the head of it's right above the skin, and we all hope for that because you can grab it, pull it out. But sometimes you have a splinter, you know what's in there. You can feel the difference. There's a piece of wood underneath it. It goes in deeper, and it's underneath the skin. You can't get to it. So you don't want to dig it out. You want to wait till your body will naturally push it out, little by little, push it out, at least so the tip of it's out, so you can grab it, pull it out, get it out the rest of the way. I believe that's an analogy or an example of what happens with triggers, or the root cause of triggers. So we get triggered, and it's our body telling us, it's part of us telling us, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to. There's something you need to pay attention to. In the same way that if you get a toothache, you need to pay attention to that because there's infection that's causing that pain. The kind of pain that comes from that is something that you need to be aware of, if that makes more sense. Okay. Glenn, if I know something is triggering me, how might I identify what is the root cause?
Yeah, my son Michael just told me he's been listening to the broadcast. He said, you two talk a lot. He made me laugh. I said, isn't that good? It's really good when you talk. I don't have to.
Yeah.
That's funny. We do talk a lot. We're talkers. We love to talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell him thank you. I'm taking that as a compliment.
And you're right. We have to talk a lot because, you have these short answers. Sometimes you just say, yeah.
You've been getting better.
You have been getting better.
Give me the question again, please.
Oh, absolutely. If I know something is triggering me, how might I identify what the root cause is?
Yeah, well, the difficulty I had was thinking of something that triggers me. So I came up with a cruelty. If I see a person being treated cruelly or an animal, that will trigger me.
Hmm.
But this I can't see like that. I have a root cause. Perhaps someone can help. I just
Yeah.
think it's a response to seeing maltreatment.
Yeah.
Jen, anyone got any ideas?
Well, that's a pretty common thing. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that don't want to see other people mistreated. But
Yeah.
I would wonder if you were when you were a kid, if you ever saw something really, really horrible, something really traumatic, or something happen to someone and it really affected you. I don't know.
Nope,
Yeah, that could happen.
not that I can think of.
But yeah, I think in our humanity, seeing someone getting mistreated, even if we haven't been, in that way, can trigger all kinds of feelings.
There you go. So it's
And
interesting. Before we move on, it's interesting you say that you said nothing triggers you, or how did you phrase
I
that?
said I found it difficult to find something that triggers me. I had to think really hard. Now, it's going to be the response to that is going to be either I'm just used to, if I do get triggered, I so quickly consign it to a place that it's not going to affect me, or I don't know, but I just don't have these episodes of where I feel triggered. If I see someone else get triggered, uh, usually I'm asking me the same question you did. I wonder what caused that.
Okay.
But I
Well,
don't really apply it to me that much at all.
we're gonna get to the positive triggers, but I have seen you be triggered before. For
Go for it.
instance, well, when you came, not it wasn't a negative trigger. I didn't think so at all. But in the other area, when you were at Mom's townhouse and you went up the stairs and you were, just having your personal time, after she had passed away, and you were emotional. I mean, that wouldn't you consider when you have an emotion like that come up? Is that not considered a trigger to you?
That's a very good question. I didn't even think of something like that
Oh,
as a trigger. I just thought of that as okay. Maybe I should explain why I went to the townhouse. Is that
sure.
relevant for anyone to hear?
It's relevant
Yeah.
to me.
I will. Well, I'm very into energy,
Sure.
so I wanted to go to the townhouse to see if I felt anything.
Yeah.
But, okay, simple as that, really. And in that one particular spot, absolutely, it was overwhelming. You saw my reaction.
I
It was
did.
like, oh, it was heavy. It was heavy going.
Yeah.
Like, but nowhere else in the house except in one particular spot.
Right.
So,
So, oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
no, you please. You good?
So, whatever happened, however you felt that, in my opinion, that is an example of a trigger, whether it's spiritual, emotional, mental, whatever it is. I mean, it could have been I would say, rather than demons. I mean, why would a demon want you to be emotional and have that tender moment about my mom's passing? I would say it was the Holy Spirit. That'd be my thing. I would say it was a God thing. You don't have to agree with that. Obviously, if you don't believe in God, you're not going to believe that that's potentially what it could have been. But it's something outside of yourself.
It is 100% something I can never understand.
Right.
All I can say is, I felt it. It's real. I accept it. I accept knowing that I don't know what it is. How could I rationalize something like that?
Yeah, I it's just an opinion, but I don't think you can rationalize something like that. I witnessed it. So this isn't just some story that Glenn's telling. I mean,
Yeah.
I was there. I saw it happen. And I didn't tell him where she had died. I mean, he knew it was upstairs. I think I
No,
met.
I didn't know where she died at all. I didn't. She could have died in the park for all I knew.
Oh,
So I had no idea.
Well, I didn't remember not sharing with
Oh,
you.
you may have, but I didn't really take it on board. I was probably a
Sure.
bit too distraught, to be honest.
Yeah, that's understandable. Either way, you didn't know the exact place. We didn't discuss that, at least for sure. I know that much. I didn't go into detail about where her body was laying and all that. So you went in her bedroom where she had lived her life, and went around the house and felt nothing, didn't feel anything in the bedroom. And then when you walked right over the spot between the hallway and the bathroom, in the hallway between the bathroom and the bedroom, that's where you felt it. Okay.
Correct.
So, regardless of what people think that was, um, it's a trigger. You're being triggered by something. And I know we're not at the positive part yet, but the positive part, desire, you came up with your own example. When you think about Japan, you're ready to go. That's, in my opinion, that's a trigger. Your memories of it are a trigger. So
That's fair comment. I suppose what I was looking for was the negative ones first.
yeah, I understand. Yeah,
Just in the context of the flow of the broadcast,
sure.
and I found that quite difficult to come up with something.
I understand that, and that's a good thing, Glenn. If you can't think of anything that triggers you in a negative way, a negative emotion, I mean, you might just be the only perfect person in the world. You just don't get
Hardly likely.
That's a perfect answer. I mean, I do pretty well now, but it's taken me a long time to not be as allow triggers to affect me emotionally. But it happens. It probably happens to more people than not. Um, I know there are people like in Buddhism and things like that, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find their bliss, their equilibrium, their spiritual balance. They want to get to the point where they don't care about possessions. They don't care about all this stuff, and they want to be in a state of peace all the time, regardless of what's happening in the outside world. Um, I don't know. I don't know how possible that is with everything that's going on in the world. It's just hard for me to imagine a person that's not ever triggered.
I'm sure it happens, but but, but maybe it's just it's not that what's the word, intense, that I
Yeah,
even
I
take
was gonna
notice
say.
of it. I just let it go as fast as it comes through. Like I spoke with Sandra about this topic, and I said, "Well, you want to just elaborate a little bit on what happened between yourself and your mother?" And basically, she said, "This is me relating what Sandra said." She said, "I said to my mum once, I don't ever remember you being a loving mother," and stuff
Oh,
like this. And she was, every time that Sandra would be in her presence, she'd get her put down, like, "Oh, gee, that dress looks a bit ordinary," or, "Gee, I don't like your haircut." You know what
Right.
yes.
the constant critique or criticism that comes. I said, "Well, okay, so you've had this consistently from okay, no, I asked the question, when did this start?" She said, "When I was a child, but it intensified as I became an adult."
Yeah.
And when I got to adulthood, and she was saying, I said, "How did you deal with this?" She said, "Well, basically, if I didn't allow myself to put it to one side, it would have just kept consuming me. So I just made a conscious choice that I knew what was going to happen. I was ready for it,
Yeah.
and I just consigned it to the wastebasket as soon as it happened, and just
Yeah.
moved past it." So yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
Smart woman.
That's a perfect example. So if you're aware of it, so she knew what was happening. She didn't want to allow it to, wreck her, right? So she took necessary steps to not have that happen. So she knew what was at the core. It wasn't blocked. It wasn't something that she wasn't aware of. If you're aware of what is at the core of why you're reacting, or you feel like reacting, regardless of whether what that is. If you're aware of the root cause, you can do something to change it. That's kind of the point. For Jen to be able to move forward like she has to be aware of what's causing it.
Yeah. And that was going to be my question for Sandra, if you don't mind relaying this, Glenn, is when she put it in the wastebasket, was she, because for me, I was sort of putting it in the wastebasket, but for me, my wastebasket was me. So I was stuffing it deep
Yeah.
down in me.
Right.
And I wonder if Sandra did that or if she literally like detached from it.
I think I can answer that for her.
Okay.
No way. She doesn't. She will not internalize that and
That's
just
good.
sort of like a cancer that's going to fester inside her. Not a chance. She'll
Yeah.
consign it outwards and say, "Look, flick off." You know, it's
Yeah.
gone.
Can you imagine?
It's not going to affect me because
Yeah.
what good is that if I let that take over every time my mum is going to speak to me?
Yeah.
I'm just going to feel like a piece of crap for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It's not happening. She just said it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, I'm amazed by that because I don't think Sandra definitely had some knowledge, because I think sometimes when people have stuff like that happen to them, they don't know how to not internalize it. They
Right.
don't know the mechanisms of that.
Right. That's the point.
Yeah. So bravo, Sandra. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is it can affect if she did not do that, it could affect her relationship with me.
Yeah. And many things, health, all kinds of stuff. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. But it's never had enough. All it has been is a talking point, a discussion point. I'll ask her a question. She'll relay something. We just talk about it. But there's never any. Okay. Did I ever feel any angst from Sandra against her mother? No, I did not. I've never felt angst. But what I've felt at sometimes is an internal sadness with Sandra that it couldn't have been better.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's not like she's not hasn't got an emotional thought that I know. I wish this was nicer, that I could have a constructive relationship with my mother. But I have to accept for my own sanity that it isn't possible.
Yeah. I don't know if she's ever thought of it, but that treatment of her from her mom sounds narcissistic. There's a type of narcissist that, especially mothers and daughters, where they just hate their daughters and they're in competition with them. It's a very interesting dynamic.
I asked her that question. Did she think that her mum was a narcissist? And she said, I don't think she was bright enough to be a narcissist. She's just a space cadet.
Okay.
So,
yeah, there you go.
That was the response.
Wonderful. Well, I think it's great if you're aware or cognizant enough of who you are as a person and you can deal with these things. I want to ask you, Glenn, because I know where Jen stands on this. Can you imagine what would happen to a person if they didn't recognize these things and they did stuff them or internalize them? So they're not dealing with it. They're not thinking of ways to avoid letting it fester inside, whether they're aware of it or not. It's not happening. Can you imagine? Can you put yourself in that place?
If I put myself in that place, I would see a path to self-destruction. It would be just a case, how long is it going to take?
Yeah.
But I think ultimately you're going down.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of my point. These people that experience war, a lot of times the goal is to get them to go into counseling so they can deal with the trauma that they felt, or people that go through abuse in their marriage, things like that. I mean, really, really mental cruelty and emotional, even if it's not physical, it's still abuse, guys. So when you go through that, you have to do something to deal with that. If you don't, it is going to eat you alive. So anyway, I don't want to spend all of our time on this one question, but these questions are fascinating. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. I'll just say in closing to that first really, really good question. A lot of us are triggered by something, and if it's a negative trigger, the best thing to do is try to find the root cause. And if you don't know how to do that, shoot me an email or something, and I can give you some tips on that. I'm sure there's a lot of information out there. This is a big topic, and especially with narcissism on the rise, people are getting triggered left and right by these narcissists. And there's lots of information on how to deal with it if you feel like you're in one of those relationships. So there's that. Next question. If I don't know something is triggering me, how might I identify? Well, there you go. Here's the question. How might I identify that my actions and responses are potentially the result of being triggered?
Me.
Yeah, I heard
Pick
you.
me. Pick me.
I picked you, Jen. Jen, you have your answer.
Well, I'll give an example. There's been many times that, like in the past 3 years, where I've had sadness come over me,
Yeah,
and it's been really, gosh, I hate when I think of a word and it pops out of my head, disorienting,
yeah,
because everything, like at the times where it's happened, everything around me in the present is great.
yeah.
You know, I'm like in this amazing marriage to this amazing guy, and I've got this
Aw.
job I love, and there's just peace reigning like crazy, even
Yeah,
despite what's going on in the world and stuff. So, and I was going to add from the first question, one of the ways that I was responding to myself is in my head, I would ask or would say to myself, "What is wrong with you?" Like I was so mean to myself, like thinking there's something broken, there's something wrong with me.
yeah,
And my amazing husband I would share with him when this would happen. And sometimes he'd say, "Do I need to remind you what you went through 14 years?" And a lot of
yeah,
times I'd say yes. It's almost like I needed someone to remind me
yeah,
what I went through, and that I do have a lot to be sad about.
yeah.
And so this sadness that I kept stuffing and stuffing and stuffing and ignoring because I was trying to survive was surfacing. And so what was the question again?
Sure. I don't. If I don't know something is triggering me, how might I identify that my actions and responses are potentially a result of a trigger? How do I know it's a trigger
Yes.
that's causing?
Yeah. So my point is being, if nothing in your present matches the
Right.
trigger, a lot of
Beautiful.
times that can give you a huge flag, not necessarily red flag, but flag,
Yeah.
to let you know something's going on. Another example I'll give is with my family. And I'll get into this more when we do the ego show. But because of my deflated ego through many different things, it made me very sensitive, and I'm already a sensitive person. So I would get triggered by my family. They'd ask a question or make a comment, and sometimes it was a little iffy.
Yeah.
But my reaction was it had like a plethora of memories tucked behind it.
Right.
So instead of just me maybe reacting a little bit in the moment or not reacting at all, it was all of these things built up from the past popping up along with the emotion that I was feeling in the moment. So it just made it exponential. It was just not good. So a lot of times it's maybe the reaction to something or someone or a smell or taste or all kinds of things being
Right.
um unproportionate to
Yes.
what you might see as normal.
Yeah. I couldn't think of the right word when I was talking about it either, Jen. There is a word for it. It basically is what you're feeling doesn't match you're feeling way more intensely about something, and it doesn't seem to be congruent to whatever situation you're experiencing at the time.
Yeah,
But
beautifully said.
there's a word for it, and I can't think of the word. It's misplaced. It doesn't match up.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great response. I don't really have much to add to that. Yeah. So I don't know something. If I don't know what's triggering you, how might I identify? I don't have a better answer than that. If it doesn't match the situation, if what you're experiencing in that moment doesn't seem triggering or stressful, you can't attach it to anything, then you can know that it's from something else. And
Yeah.
it can be anything. It could be a smell. It could be a word that someone says. It could be a tone of voice. Someone might even be joking around and use a tone of voice in a joking manner, and you're triggered by it. And you're not triggered by the person. I mean, the person you might totally trust them,
Yeah.
and you're reacting. That's a good example, I think.
Yeah.
So it could be something else from before, from your past, something that happened to you. I'm not saying this is always easy. I'm not saying that everyone should just intuitively know how to do this, except for Glenn. This is something I learned how to do. And this is from reading books. And my mother was a counselor. And so we would have these conversations. And because this word years ago, probably 30 years ago, it's something my mom learned about when she went to college to be a counselor. This has been around for a while, the idea of triggering and what's related to it. So I've just been aware of this. So when Jen was going through her things, I would ask her certain questions. I'd be like, is there something I'm doing? I would always at the beginning I would check to make sure, am I doing something that is making you feel uncomfortable? Am I doing something that you don't like? And she would always say no. And it was really an honest question on my part because I don't know. It was early in our relationship, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything that triggered her. My biggest concern was I didn't want to treat her in any way like her ex did.
Yeah, fat chance of that happening.
No, thank you. Yeah, you're right, though. Fat chance of that happening. I just wouldn't do that. And if I did that, I would change my behavior immediately. So I trust her when she says that, when she's having one of those moments where she says, no, it's not anything you've done or said.
Yeah.
Then there's only one other option for me, So I would say, well, it's something from the past then. And reminding her of what she went through was very important in her recovery process.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, she still needs a reminder, and that's okay, because she had come to a place where she needed to, in order to survive, she needed to not think about that stuff, to really think about her situation.
Yeah, I spent 14 years minimizing my own experience to try to get through it. Minimizing and writing off and invalidating myself, what I was experiencing on a daily basis. Yikes. So yeah, coming out of that and having to deprogram myself, on the other side of this huge thing, and just reminding myself and being reminded, by people around me, hey, this was really bad.
Yeah. Now, hasn't it gotten easier for you now that you're kind of aware that this happens? Isn't it easier when you have a feeling come up? At least you can assess it more quickly and realize that it's probably not something that's currently happening. It's not the situation that you're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Glenn, what do you think? If I don't know something is triggering me, how might I identify that my actions and responses are potentially the result of a trigger?
Yeah, well, the comment you made about using intuition, that's probably been in place for 25 years, but if we go back beyond there, we're talking about a totally different ball game. Sure, are we? This is the stuff ups of all stuff ups, and I was situationally in a place where I had no idea what was causing my distress. I mean,
Right.
I could say it's just the situation, but all I know is I felt like crap. Now I thought I can remember I made a comment to someone that sticks in my head because subsequently this all came out. I said I think therapy is shit or crap.
Yeah.
It's rubbish. Why would you bother? Nobody needs a therapist. They can sort it out for themselves. The hardest thing for me to do when I had to go back and try to resolve this was admit that I really had no idea how to.
Yeah.
So I basically had to put aside the feelings of, hey, I'm weak, I don't know anything, and say, okay, someone obviously knows more than I do. I need to get help, otherwise I'm going to take myself. I will go down.
Right.
And I will be in the nut house.
Right.
No pun intended for Mr. Nut House. But you know what I mean.
I do.
Yeah.
It's enough to send you mental.
Right.
So I would say to someone who's confused and at a loss, reach out to someone who you trust and knows more than you do.
Yeah.
At least to communicate the issues that you're facing. I'd be very positive about doing that. It helped me, and without that help, I wouldn't have been able to sort of go forward. I think I would have been stagnated into a situation that I would still be in, and I would probably have been dead because my body couldn't take it, the stress
Right.
or the distress. You can't keep doing this forever. So that's my response. If you don't know, find a way to get on board with somebody who can help.
Right. That's a great answer. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Glenn. Appreciate that. And if it's not too much to ask, I think when you're speaking, there's some notifications that are coming in. I don't know if it's distracting for anyone else, but if you don't mind, if you could turn the volume down on that a little bit. If it's not you, I apologize, but it seems when you're answering a question, it's coming up. I don't know.
It's the kids talking, and I shut them down on the computer, but I'll just turn the sound off on my phone.
That's all. That'd be.
No, fair point. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, so we all answered that question. The next one: how does my response to my trigger manifest? Example: do I get upset, withdrawn, ignore, etc.? Great question. Do you want to go first again, Jen?
I'm gonna wait.
Okay, I'll go. Okay. It depends on the trigger, but there are certain triggers that I know now were from family or from significant people in my life. And those generally, this may not be true for everyone, but I think it's true for a lot of people. The people that you spend the most time around are the ones that seem to trigger you the most. And there's a point to be made about that coming up. So I won't go too much on that. But certain things, like if my dad had said something to me when I was a kid and someone would talk that way to me or say similar things, anger, I would get angry and defensive. Those are the first two reactions. So those types of triggers for me, that's how I would react. Anger. Glenn used the word upset. I don't really relate to the word upset. It is being upset, but I would react out of anger and defensiveness. I want to defend myself from what I felt, what I considered was an attack of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it was. Sometimes I occasionally had hung around people that were jerks. And I mean, I can go on and on about that, but there was a point in my life where I felt it a challenge to hang around jerks because I thought that, by me being awesome and being a good friend, I could change them. I could help them because I always see the best in people first. I really do. And I'm way better at that now. I can see both. I can see good and bad. I can see it. I'm not saying I couldn't see the bad. It just, I would let whatever good I saw in them win out, trump the bad. And I got into my first marriage based on that. She wasn't a bad person, but I saw red flags. It wasn't that I was oblivious to the things that later became a real issue.
Yeah.
In fact, we went to counseling about that before we ever got married. And as you guys have heard me say before, she said she acknowledged that these were issues and she said she'd work on them during the marriage. And needless to say, I would never fall for that again. I would say, no, you work on them now because I'm not going to be able to handle you not showing up all the time and disrespecting my time and, in essence, me by the way you're treating me. So the other reaction that I had, it's interesting that he used the very word withdraw. Now, I've talked with Glenn and Jen about this. Certain triggers, bigger triggers, but it didn't make me angry. It would make me want to not be around people in general. And that was because I didn't have too many people that I really felt like I could trust and talk to. So I would deal with my own emotional situation myself. And so I could tell that something triggered me when I started to feel like not hanging around other people socially. Wanted to be by myself a lot, things like that. So that was another reaction. And I consider those deeper for me. deeper triggers than when I would get angry. To me, when I get angry or get defensive, that was a more obvious thing. If I start to withdraw, then it was something deeper that I needed to be aware of, and I would think about why it is that I feel like I need to get away from everyone. And at the core of that, we talked about not feeling safe, one of the recent broadcasts, and I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe around other people, and I didn't feel like I could trust them. So that was a big one, being triggered and to withdraw. I don't ignore. I'm not saying I never have ignored triggers, but that's not really what a problem for me. I may not have reacted positively to it, but there was a reaction. I wasn't ignoring it. So there you go. What do you think, Glenn? How does your response to your trigger manifest? Now, you've already stated that you found it difficult to think of a trigger. I thought of one.
Yeah, go on.
If you don't mind me telling something.
Oh, look, go for your
Remember when Sandra left the water running and that...
That wasn't a trigger. That's a performance to make it to make myself feel better and make it feel like a piece of crap.
Make who feel like a piece of crap?
Sandra. But see, that's not really a trigger. I know that I'm going to have to clean it up, but it's just a way of releasing the tension. And when I was saying that, I'm laughing. It's not like I'm serious. So I don't think that's really a trigger. It's in the moment. It's just frustration beyond belief that she's flooded the house, and then went on to do it another twice. Yeah, right. Yeah. And how would I react to that? Well, first of all, I'm not angry, but it might come across if I'm giving a Hollywood performance that I am. I'll just go on for the sake of the performance. Do I ignore it? No. What was the other one? Ignore.
Withdraw.
Anger. No withdrawal. No, not at all. But that's the difference between when you're with someone that you're connected with. Just you can say anything you like.
Yeah.
As hard and go in as hard as you want. But in a minute or 5 minutes, it's all going to be over and normal service is resumed, and there's no sort of what's the word I'm looking for? There's no grudge. There's nothing. So
right.
That's just more like the sign of a relationship that's on path. So, but in general, I would say I don't do anger. I'm more likely to, if someone triggers, I'm going to think, well, is it worth me saying anything?
Right.
And I'll ignore it. I'll just walk off basically and just roll my eyes and think, oh yeah, another idiot sort of thing. But if I saw someone maltreating a cat or a dog, I would step forward and I would give it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very circumstantial.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate
that. Okay. Sure.
I hate to be a stickler on this, but that bing bonging thing was happening again. It's really
Is it? Oh, sorry. I'm going to put my phone outside. Okay, thanks. I turned the sound off too. Crazy. Okay.
It's still coming up somewhere. I don't know where, but
Ding.
Yeah, just every few minutes, and
My turn.
Yes, please go, Jen.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, mine manifests as pain, physical pain, in my neck and my head and my jaw. My muscles clench up so tight. I feel like I've been at the gym for 50 million hours.
Right.
And sadness too. And every once in a while, anger. I was thinking about that time that we went to Dre's graduation, and some of the things that you were dealing with made me think of all of these memories with my ex. And because he didn't like crowds, he didn't like people, he didn't like social functions. And you were dealing with your back, hurting, and you were fidgeting next to me, and I just got so triggered. And I just came home and threw some glasses.
Yeah.
The anger that came up in me, it was like every memory of my ex stealing my joy And I understand now that, to a degree, like that's my job to hold on to in a sense, but just the dynamic that was going on in the marriage, it was just, he would pick fights when we'd hang out with family, like when we'd be doing anything that what meant so much to me.
Right.
He would just do things, and I had stuffed all of this anger, this hurt, because underneath anger is hurt, and it sure did bubble up that day.
Yeah. Sure did. Yeah.
And but yeah, right now it's, I've been dealing with the sadness and the anger that's come up, but mainly right now it's just pain, my body, me being in pain. See, there you go, good example.
Yeah. Yeah.
I corrected myself. I'm in pain.
You're in pain. Right.
my
Exactly.
pain.
My pain. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the main one for me.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that so much. All right. Next question. How do I explain my trigger to someone who is in my firing line and has no idea what might be happening? And I'll go first on this. So I'll use Jen as an example, and I'll use Glenn as an example as well. So Glenn was talking, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but when you're comfortable with someone, you can just, you can just be honest, and you can be upfront with them. And I have that with Jen. And she doesn't trigger me. I mean, I'm not saying I've never been triggered, but when I feel anything, I discuss it with her. So there's not too many things that I can use as an example.
Ooh.
Oh, go ahead.
Can I give you one?
Please do. Please give me.
So that the time that I went and got the sun drop, and I got the wrong one, and I the first things out of my mouth, and this is where validation comes in. The first thing out of my mouth was, I didn't realize, that they were different. I was kind of making excuses.
Yeah.
And they were legitimate,
Yeah, sure.
But
sure they were.
But you were triggered because you've had a whole line of people in your life that have forgotten you.
Yep.
And it may sound silly to some, but I totally get how that was a trigger. People would say, "Oh, I'll meet you there," or "I'll call you," or "We'll hang out," or "I'll get you this thing on my way home," and people just have not followed through, and it made you feel unseen and unheard and ignored and discarded, and so that's one that I thought of for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, because there's not too many, but that is one I do remember. And it also makes you feel like that. Now, this is not true about Jen at all, but in the moment, the trigger made me reminded me of times when people don't listen to me. Like when you tell someone, if they say I'm going to the store, do you want me to pick you up anything? And I'll say, yes, I want this, this, and this, or whatever. And then if they even remember to get anything, sometimes they ask you if you want anything, and then they don't even get it. So that's a whole separate thing. But if they get something and you make it clear you want a certain brand or you want this or that, and they don't get it. And in the case of the sun drop, the diet sun drop, she got caffeine free, which is, by the way, I know there's people out there, you shouldn't be drinking diet soda at all. I get it, guys. I get it. But if I'm going to drink it, the caffeine free is just horrible. And I don't like it. And we've since cleared all that up, and it never happened again. But I knew that I wasn't angry at Jen herself. I know that she cares about me. Even at that point in our relationship, she has shown me many things that tell me that she cares about me. She respects me. She didn't mean to do it. So that made me think about, why am I triggered in this situation? What's causing this? Is it because I could tell it wasn't Jen? What are you going to say, Jen?
We were both triggered. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
We were both triggered because I had a huge trigger of making mistakes and having someone ream me the F out every time. And so in Jason being triggered, and he went to this place where he learned with his sister and his mom that his tone would trigger them. So
Yeah.
he would start using no tone, like a flat affect tone
Yeah.
with them in order to not trigger them. But his flat affect triggered me on top of being triggered with making
Yeah.
a mistake. And he wasn't like, oh, that's okay. You know, do you mind running back
Yeah.
to the store and getting so I was like, what's happening here? Oh my gosh. And it felt like the floor fell out from under me. Like
Wow.
inside I was grappling at straws,
Yeah.
trying to stay up. And then when I was triggered, how I was responding to him was I get a little cold and distance, which is completely the opposite of who I normally am.
Yeah.
So we both went into this place as we were communicating with each other. It was just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. But we
It
talked
was
through it.
hard.
It was hard.
It was hard, yeah. So what Jen is talking about, the lights are on, but the Jen that I know and love, and that she is 99.9% of the time, wasn't home.
Yeah.
It was almost like
I had retreated into myself.
Yeah, it was like a robot. Now the robot that was left that looked like my wife was still. I mean, everything was the same, except she wasn't angry. She didn't seem quote unquote triggered, but there was definitely something wrong. And I want to address what she said about this tone that I have used. I think it's only happened twice.
Yeah.
And one time it happened, and yeah, you told me right away how uncomfortable you were. And I realized that I had done that. And she's absolutely right in the way she characterized it. Because my mom and sister were so triggered by my by my tone, it's an emotionless tone without inflection, and I can see why she would react to that, because normally I do talk with inflection, I do talk with emotion, so I get why that would be an issue.
Yeah,
so not something I do regularly, but it's definitely something I did that time.
Yeah. It was like the Jason and Jen that we both knew, they like left the building.
Right. Exactly.
Which is such an odd thing, because then we're triggering off of each other.
Yeah. So the way I explain, to answer the question, how do I explain my trigger to someone who's in the firing line and has no idea what may be happening? Well, Jen, it's not really fair to use Jen as an example, because she knows we've been together long enough where she knows that I will tell her if I'm feeling triggered. I just will say,
Yeah.
I'm having an interesting reaction right now. And I know it's not Jen. I know it's not her. It's something about the situation. It's something's coming up for me. So I just tell her I'm feeling triggered. And she might say, oh, what do you think? What do you think's causing it? Doesn't happen very often at all anymore. Might have happened 3 or 4 times since we've known each other. But when it does happen, we just talk about it. So communication to me is key in any relationship. If you're communicating with the person and something comes up, you just recognize, hey, ooh, I'm having a weird feeling, and you share it with the other person and they can help you figure it out. I mean, that's the best case scenario. If you're with someone you don't trust and this happens, if I try to answer the question from that perspective, how do you explain the trigger to someone? If you're aware in the first place that that's what's happening to you, it's really easy to say, you know what, I'm what you just said or what you just did, I'm having a reaction to it, and I need to work it out. I need to process it. If you can't talk to the person, but my first choice would always be just to tell the person. And, that's assuming that the person that you're in relationship with, you feel comfortable enough doing that. But that would be the goal, in my opinion. What do you think, Jen?
I was typing in the chat, so I wasn't listening. I'm sorry. Are you triggered? Sorry.
No, I am not. Like I said, the more and more here's the thing. The more and more I get to know Jen, and the more and more she showers me with love, the less possibility there is of ever being triggered, because I know that she doesn't do anything intentionally. If you know that a person doesn't purposely want to hurt you or trigger, because there are some people that do, We all know that. There are people out there that want to get a rise out of you. Glenn does it sometimes, and he'll cop to it right away. He put his hand up, say, I was just giving a go to you or whatever. I forget how he phrased it. We say get a rise out of you. He's trying to get a rise out of you, but he'll say something that he knows will cause a reaction. It's all in fun. It's not like he wants to make me angry or anything, but I think he likes to see reactions sometimes. He likes to see what people do or see what I do when I'm reacting to something. Would you say that's a fair point, Glenn?
I'd say that's spot on.
Yeah. So now that I'm aware of it, that's the key. We lost Jen, so I'm sure she'll pop in. It was her turn to answer the question. So we'll go to you, Glenn, while we're waiting on Jen to come back. So how do I explain my trigger to someone who's in the firing line? Well, here she is. Hold on. Welcome back, Jen.
Sorry, just kicked me off.
Oh, that's okay. So are you ready to answer this?
Yeah.
Okay. How do I explain my trigger to someone who's in my firing line and has no idea what might be happening?
That's a great question. Because I haven't had a whole lot of experience with this outside of you.
Right.
But I've talked with my family a little bit recently with my triggers. Just explaining that I have a lot of memories of something similar happening.
Yeah.
There's some similarity to it that's making me remember a lot of traumatic memories in my past all at once, which is a lot.
Right.
And that I'm not reacting to you. I'm just reacting to all these memories that are coming up within this moment with this thing that happened between us or this thing that happened to me.
Right.
That's how I would explain it. And like you said, I think you're a little more vocal, like about you being triggered. It's just because you've had more practice, I guess, letting me know. I mean, I guess you could tell me. I think there are times I'm still kind of in this middle place of recognizing that it's a trigger, because I'm at that limbo place where I still have these moments where my mind will be saying, what's wrong with you? And then coming in behind that thought is, this is old stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm still finding that balance of recognizing it. So more times than not, I think you've pointed out that it's a trigger more so, or have asked me, is this a trigger?
Yeah.
And then I'm in the process of exploring that thought, and applying it to the situation at hand.
Yeah. Well, just really quickly, let me remind you that at least with me, when you don't like something, you're pretty good at saying, well, you didn't really validate me just then, babe.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're
Glenn's not gonna like that one.
I know. Well, I can't help what Glenn likes or doesn't like at this point. But
although we laugh about it when I say it, you crack up and I laugh, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, it is hilarious. Yeah, I actually laugh when she calls me out on something. She'll say, "Oh, well, are you getting a little defensive, or was that comment passive aggressive?" She just call me out on it, and I'll start laughing. And then I have to think about the way I said it and wonder if it was passive aggressive. So I have to search my feelings to see why I said or did something in particular. And again, this comes from someone that is introspective and they monitor themselves, and then they're trying to be a better person. And I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else or anything like that. I have worked on this.
Yeah.
And I want to be that type of person. I want to be a person that monitors the language that comes out of my mouth and monitors how I treat other people. So that's what that comes from.
Yeah.
All right, Glenn, how do I explain my trigger to someone who's in my firing line and has no idea what might be happening?
Very tough one. Since I don't get triggered that much. So I'm gonna use your mum as an example though. I mean, I could say that the sky is blue and she'll come back and say, well, that's a pineapple. Like
Yeah.
her responses would bear no relevance to what I may have said. But the thing is, she comes back angry with all the like with firing off shotgun pellets. But how do you ask someone or try to explain a trigger when the other person's angry? It doesn't work.
No, it's hard.
Yeah.
So it puts you in. It leaves you what you might call mystified.
Yeah.
Totally, like throwing up your hand and say, "Well, what on earth set that off?"
Right.
And yeah, I know that's a nebulous answer. I don't know. I just don't. I've never really had people. I've never had an understanding of what might trigger people. But your Jen's and your examples are really good ones. But they're not ones that I've experienced personally.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me switch gears for a second because
Sure.
you used my mom for an example. Now, obviously, you had seen her be triggered on a number of occasions. So, if you don't mind, describe what that looked like to you and how you reacted to her being triggered. And then the follow up would be, did she explain? Did it seem like she was aware that her reaction was out of place or anything like that?
No, she would just be so angry. She'd say, "I can't." She would say, "I'm not dealing with this. I'm going," and like just sort of extricate, and the email or the would go dead. So you're sort of even more in the dark because if someone's not willing to, if you've got a question, well, it just doesn't work with someone. Anyone who's angry is not in a place to have any sort of relevant conversation, as far as I can see it.
Yeah.
And that's how she was. She just, oh, I suppose you could say it did trigger me.
Yeah.
In retrospect, yes, it would, because you would be so uncertain as to what might come back, and you'd never understand what you may have done. But obviously, it's something that you've done. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the trigger.
Right.
So it had to be me that said something. But could I figure it out? Nope.
No.
If I was doing a wind up and she was having a bad day, well, then I could understand it. I'd say, yeah, look, I was just joking. But, if you're having a bad day and someone's winding you up, obviously, sometimes it doesn't go over so well. But this is more just conversational where one would be speaking Chinese and the other one's talking Latin.
Right.
It was just so far apart. So
Right.
I hope. So no, she didn't really make an effort to explain the trigger of the moment, other than the major trigger that we all know was part of her life.
Right.
All
Exactly.
sitting in the background here.
Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, so I remember that. My mother had no problem letting you know. There wasn't a question that she was triggered for me. She was very, her body language was very emotive, and she would sometimes yell, sometimes just cut her eyes at you. She'd look at you in a certain way, and you know that you have done something. And sometimes I was aware, and sometimes I wasn't. But she had no problem telling you, and you knew it from her reaction. So, um, I prefer that. I prefer that someone react, and then I know something's wrong, rather than just acting like everything's okay. So going back to the other question, she would isolate. She'd react, and then, like Glenn said, she'd be gone. She'd go to her room or leave angry, slam the door. She was a door slammer, cupboard slammer, things like that. So at least with her, there was plenty of indication knowing that she was not pleased. Other people are way more subtle. They might be angry at you, and you don't know till they unfriend you on Facebook. They're done, and that's happened to me where I don't know what it is that I did or said, but someone that was on my friend list is now gone. And that used to really frustrate me. It doesn't now. If it happened recently, I wouldn't even know it unless it was someone that I talked to frequently. But all right. Gosh, time's really getting away from us. We have 20 minutes. So I just want to just talk briefly. I'm going to read this really quick. Glenn tells a story here, which I thought was very useful. He says, we hear in cases of PTSD that trauma and stress can manifest at any moment, and that is so true. It's kind of what we're talking about. It can come anytime and may not even be prepared for it. This is way outside my frame of reference, hence I can't imagine what it's like to live in this personal prison. So here's the story. Here's the reference, rather. One thing that comes to mind is Syria, which is a beautiful country with wonderful people. Many of those things we experienced are now gone forever, smashed beyond recognition. The people are smashed. What can one say? Syria is a good example. There are other examples. There are all kinds of places. And Jen and I were talking about this. Glenn has a better frame of reference than a lot of people because he's so well traveled. He's traveled other places and he's told us stories of, this was Jen that reminded me of this. He's seen squalor. He's seen places where people are really impoverished and they're living in horrible conditions. I think when you have that and you see that and you think about your own situation, it's much easier to kind of take a more relaxed attitude about whatever you're personally going through. Not all of us get that. I think, this is my opinion, but I think in the West, at least in America, we're very spoiled when it comes to this sort of thing. We react to things that happen in traffic. We react if we spill our coffee. It's like it's the end of the world. Yeah, and I wish we all could travel more and see how other countries have it, and then that might be easier to think twice about how we're reacting to our own situation. Especially believers, a lot of people will say, the Christians are persecuted, and I've used this example before, but they say, oh, well, every Christmas, people get mad at me because I say Merry Christmas, that they want to hear Happy Holidays. Or Starbucks, I remember several years ago, they used to have a more Christmassy cup, the cardboard cups that they give you, and they changed it. They took off the logo around Christmas time and just made it a red cup. And Facebook was all a Twitter about that. People saying, oh my gosh, they're trying to take Christ out of Christmas. Now, I agree that they are. They've been doing that for years. When you go and attack people for setting up a nativity scene across from a public school, you're going too far, in my opinion. But there are countries where Christians are being beaten and dragged to jail and killed. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is happening, but the news doesn't cover it because there are obviously bigger fish to fry. We all know what the bigger fish are. But my point is, here in America, we're spoiled and we don't recognize how other countries have it. It's my opinion. Now, knowing that, I am humbled by that. I try to self-regulate, and when I'm reacting to a situation, I try to remind myself that people have it harder in a lot of cases than I do. Now, that having been said, Glenn makes a good point in here. You can't compare yourself to other people. It's difficult. He says, this makes me think many of our so-called issues are overblown by the reality, but the reality is they are real and cannot be compared. So you can go too far the other end where you're saying, and people can react to you like this too. You're complaining about something. They said, well, there are people in Africa that don't have any food. You're like, well, where'd that come from? That has nothing. We're not even talking about food. So you can go too far the other way. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up a little bit. And then Glenn says, obviously, there are varying degrees of being triggered and varying degrees of responses. It's my hope that the stories on this topic will be revealed tonight. I think we've told plenty of stories. And then he says, I wonder, is imprisonment taking it too far? Just how widespread is it that people are captive of their own personal triggers? Let's look at some negative triggers first. So some of the negative triggers, some examples are being neglected, ignored, manipulated, disrespected, judged, and unsafe. So I'm going to ask you, Jen, How have you reacted to these things? Any one of them: neglected, ignored, manipulated, disrespected, judged, or unsafe.
For me, just retreating more and more into myself,
Okay.
which a lot of times people call that self erasure.
Wow, big
Um,
word.
yeah,
Big word. Self erasure. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't really allowed to react for a long time. It was a double standard. Like he was allowed to rage out and break things and punch things, and I just wasn't.
Right.
Um, and I don't know how much more I could say on that, but it just, and I think that is why I'm triggered now and why it's coming up sideways, like Glenn would say,
Yeah.
because I had stuffed it for so long. Emotions were not safe to have any kind, anger,
Right.
sadness, crying. It just was not safe,
Right.
and accepted and consoled. And it just, there's so much there missing. Um, so yeah, that's, and in the past, that's how I reacted. Now, gosh, I don't really experience those things now. um, Maybe a little bit here and there because people are people. And
Sure.
even with the triggers, sometimes you're reacting to feeling neglected, for example, and you're not really being, it's just something about it feels familiar. Um, Gosh, so it's just identifying the trigger
Yeah.
and actually allowing myself to recognize the emotions, feel them.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Like instead of stuffing, because there's still a big part of me that's trained to stuff, because
Yeah.
it was going on for so long. So it's a conscious effort to remind myself not to stuff. And that's gotten a lot easier because of you. You have been so open and such a safe place for me to even share. And a lot of times it's just the sharing, for me at least,
Yeah.
that keeps me from stuffing, and keeps me from continuing to be triggered
Sure.
with something. It's just sharing it with someone who actually cares. It's such a huge thing because I didn't have that for
Right.
14, 15 years.
Right.
So that would be my answer.
Thank you, Jen. And a follow-up question. Glenn put in the chat, Jen, do you define that as a prison? So, Glenn, could you say what part were you asking about? It? Does she define what as a prison? You're talking
Well,
about,
Jen was addressing those points
yeah,
about how she internalized them, and I was asking, well,
yeah,
would you define that as a prison or something that is actually controlling you?
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. I did not have the freedom to be a human being with emotions and feelings. It was not safe. So there was many times I felt like a robot, like I was observing my life from deep inside myself,
wow,
which is very weird. Like
yeah,
even to the point where I would picture, my eyes as this huge windshield of this robot I was living in, and I'd be
wow,
sitting in the control seat, tied and gagged
wow,
because I their controls were there in the front, but I had no access to them because somebody else was controlling things. And
wow.
so, yeah, it incredibly felt like a prison. I just, yeah, it's bad.
Well, great question, Glenn, and thank you for your answer, Jen. Appreciate that so much. Okay. All right. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to switch gears
Wait,
again. What?
real quick, I was gonna say because I had a nap earlier. I'm good with it going over 10. Just to let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So let's see. I'll mention. So being neglected, ignored, manipulated, disrespected, judged, and unsafe. Any one of those, all of them, are horrible things to experience. I think for anyone, but for me, particularly the being ignored, I don't like it. I've never liked it. Disrespected. These are the things I mentioned earlier that I react to probably the most. The biggest thing I have noticed that I react to is people that think that I don't exist, like in traffic, like cut you off and they just act like you're not even there. You got your turn signal on and you're trying to pull off on the highway and they see you, they clearly see you, and they purposefully block the way so you can't get in or won't let you in when you're trying to turn, things like that. So it's obviously it's not just traffic, but that's the thing where it comes up the most. It's someone that just acts like, you don't matter. That really gets to me, and I don't like it. Now, I have gotten a lot better in this area because I know there are jerks out there. There are plenty of them, and I don't want that to be a prison. I don't want to be controlled by other people's reactions because I can't control them. All I can do is control me. All I can do is control the way I react to things. So that's what I try to focus on.
Yeah.
Try to focus on what I can do, how I can react better in the situation. Glenn, do you want to respond to this, that being neglected, ignored, manipulated, disrespected, judged, or unsafe?
Yeah, I do. I just had a thought. Perhaps the reason I'm not getting triggered is because I'm very effective at dissociating from people who would do that.
Oh, right. Well, you occasionally have to drive. Are they perfect drivers in Australia? They don't.
But we get idiots on the road and they cut you off or do something like a nincompoop or whatever. I just sit back and ignore it. What's the point? Just let them go and be stupid. I'm not going to get upset about it. That's just a waste of my energy.
Yeah, that's how I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, forget it. Get over it.
Mm-hmm.
I ignore them right back, act like it didn't happen.
Well, you get the ones that want to race you off or do something, or they want to cut in front of you. I just drop back another 100 meters and just let them go on and do their stupid, behave like fools.
Yeah.
Well, that's the smart
I
thing.
drop back because just in case they decide to do something stupid and pass on a hill or something, and I don't want to get collected on head on.
No.
Yeah.
No. I've seen that so many times. I watch those like car crash videos or road rage videos and things like that. It's fascinating. Sometimes it's just entertaining the way people react. But there's serious things that happen as a result of that too. People that try to pass you and they're on your left side when they're trying to pass and there's a vehicle and they're freaking out. They're trying to get back in. That's a very dangerous situation to be in.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've talked enough about the negative stuff. We've talked about what caused the trigger and some ways that we can recognize it, kind of what the process is. So in the time, there's one more left. Let me go over this. So the last question is, I'm triggered. If I don't want this trigger to rule me, what am I going to do about it? And I'm going to start with Glenn because this is a great question. So even if you don't get triggered a lot, I think that you would have a solution to this, Glenn. I'm triggered. If I don't want this trigger to rule me, what am I going to do about it? And if you can't put yourself in that place, what do people do about it when they're triggered?
I think I sort of answered this just before, even though I didn't realise, by saying I am effective at dissociating from people who would trigger me with all of those negatives.
So that's your advice then. If someone's feeling like they're being triggered a lot, it's likely the people around them that are doing that. So you would say, stop hanging around jerks.
Well, effectively, yes. I think you've got to. I think if you can be aware that who the people are, if it's close by with family, etc., well, you can't dissociate from them, but you can still have an awareness and have that attitudinal preparation for it.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to do what you've got to do, but at the end of the day, you've got to do whatever is required so that these people do not take you down, or you've got to work on yourself concurrently, of course, to get yourself into a new mindset.
Right.
I think it's a two-way street. Dissociate, but get yourself together as well.
Yeah. Wow. I love that, especially the second part. Get yourself together, because again, my opinion is you can't control other people. Yes, if you can live in a world where you can disassociate yourself from every person that ever triggers you, then yeah, okay, by all means do that. Sometimes it's family.
Yeah.
it's family that trigger you. So yeah, if that's happening, for some people, it's not an option for them to disassociate. I'm not saying there's any problem with the answer. I just sometimes you can't just get away from the person. What if it's your husband? What if it's your wife? You know, but the second answer that you just said is it makes more sense to me in a situation where you can't get away from the person. So ultimately you do the thing you can do, which is control you. If you're being triggered by someone else and they're not going to stop, of course, if you can get out, get out. Really, if you can get out. I mean, when Jen was in that abusive marriage, she decided that, I mean, she gave him a chance to work on it. And he said essentially what Glenn said he used to think, that he doesn't need counseling. He can figure it out himself in 5 minutes or whatever it was that he said. And that's why she's with me. I mean, there are other reasons, but she gave him an opportunity to work on it, which I suggested, and she did it. And he didn't have it. He was going to just solve it himself, and she's gone. So yes, if you can't get out of the situation itself, the next best thing or the best thing you can do is work on yourself. Realize that you're being triggered and what it is that's triggering you. Find the core of what it is and change something. Something about that. Glenn says after this question, did you answer, Jen? What are you going to do about it? How do you not let a trigger rule you, Jen?
Yeah, I would agree. Like for me, I didn't feel that I could divorce him
Right.
for a really long time. And I really took our vows seriously, and I didn't want to grieve God's heart. And the churches I grew up in, God hates divorce. God hates divorce.
Sure.
So it was just this thing that I didn't feel like was an option. Now, there were times where I kind of knew what he was doing. I didn't think it was on purpose at that time. And there were times I could rise above it, but it was happening so frequently, day in and day out, every day. And we worked together. So it just was constant that it just felt like I was so worn down to where my skin was so thin with being triggered, and just being hurt. And, I won't go into that, but, I will say now, being out of that situation, having gotten out, recognizing, like you were saying, the root cause, the core of it. Like I'll say with my family, for instance, I had been being triggered by my family. And at a point, like a year and a half ago, maybe less than that, I was wanting them to change what they were doing so that I could be okay and that I wouldn't be triggered. But what it came around to was I had to recognize that I was hearing things from them through this lens of a deflated ego and, all this pain that I had been through my childhood and then through that marriage. I was hearing all of these things through that particular filter.
Sure.
So recognizing that and acknowledging it was huge for me, to where it got to the point where not only was I letting them off the hook in a sense and recognizing that I can only control me and change me, just recognizing the trigger and again, realizing this realization of this past week that this is all from my own pain, and recognizing that it's mine, not somebody else's, not some disembodied, entity or something. It's like it loses its power.
Right.
So that's a big deal too. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Perhaps the solution to the trigger is not so simple when, and quote, it's funny how sometimes the people you'd take a bullet for are the ones behind the trigger. Prashant Chaudhary. That's where I was saying that a lot of times it's family, it's friends, it's your wife, it's your husband. So it's way more difficult in that situation. The point is things can get even more and more complicated when the situations involve those we love or are supposed to love. How does one deal with interactions when the trigger comes from close-knit family, siblings, partners, friends, etc.? I think we've addressed that. It's a hard call, knowing as children we may have been so affected by those close to us that now as adults we may have to consider breaking close bonds. It is sad to contemplate that this may be necessary for emotional survival. So I just want to talk about this briefly. In psychobabble terms, there's a couple different terms, but the biggest one is go no contact. And there are many people that are aware of what this is, and they're deciding to do that, even if it's family, even if it's a marriage, even if it's a really, really close friend. There are people that are just, disconnecting from the person on Facebook, or, blocking their phone, not answering calls, and more power to you. If that's what you need to do, I say do whatever you need to do, legally, to protect yourself from a person that's doing this to you. So that is a real option for a lot of folks. Go no contact. What Glenn was suggesting. It might be difficult, especially in a family situation. It might be difficult, and it's even more difficult if you have, like say for instance, you're going no contact with a mother, and you have a brother and a sister who don't seem to see what an ogre she is, and they can't see why you're doing this and think it's ridiculous, and you quit coming to family functions, and they don't like it. So they're on your back the whole time. So you get over yourself. It can't be that bad. They say these non-validating things that make you feel bad about a decision that you made in order to protect yourself. As Glenn said, it may be necessary for emotional survival. It may be necessary for that. It may even be physical. To me, those two things are the same. Whether it's physical, you're in physical danger, emotional danger, spiritual danger, mental danger, whatever it is. If you feel unsafe and unprotected, of course, work on it. If you're in a marriage like that, you're going to feel better if you try to do something and see if the other person is interested in healing with you, recovering with you.
Yep.
That's always the first option. But if you offer the other person that opportunity and they have no interest in it, what are you left to do but to protect yourself? You got to do what's right for you.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah.
Anyone want to make a comment about that point, about going no contact, and about doing what's necessary for your own emotional survival?
I think this is hard for some people.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
I think this is hard for some people because they're more focused on everybody else being okay than making sure they're okay.
Yeah.
That's something that people can get stuck on. If I go no contact with my mom, it's going to cause a huge ruckus and divide in my family, because my brother and sister don't see the ogre that she is, like you said.
Right.
But when someone, again, it really does come down to self-worth, and self-care. If something is hurting you, even emotionally, and mentally, despite, and I think some people think they look at it as selfish.
Yeah.
In their mind, it's twisted, and it was in mine too. Like, other people are more important than I am, so I'm going to make sure everybody else is okay, whether I'm okay or not.
Right.
So getting to that place where you have some self-worth and recognize that I'm important and I should be important to me, to a degree.
Yeah.
And then walk out the steps that you need to do to keep you safe and healthy. That's a big deal.
Wow. Great point. Thank you, Jen. What about you, Glenn? Any comment? I think you were going to make a comment too, right?
Yeah, I was. I was just going to say you can do it, Sandra, and you can still fulfill your daughterly duty in inverted commas, but you can have the mental preparation that no matter what's said, it's going to basically be water off a duck's back. If you can do that, that gives you a lot of options because you, sticks and stones, etc., can break your bones.
Right.
And that's how she operated. She didn't come away from a conversation with her mother feeling depressed. She just came away saying, "Oh well, I knew that was going to happen."
Yeah.
It's very much attitude.
Yeah. I would agree.
So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. All right. Glenn says in the write-up, whew, we don't end tonight's broadcast in a state of exhaustion. The good news is there are positive triggers. Perhaps we don't pay enough attention to them. I have many. They are not driven by fear, but as the quote says, by desire. The Cambridge Dictionary defines desire as to want something, especially strongly. I cannot deny that when I watch Japan videos on YouTube, I am triggered. I can smell the green tea in food and I am ready. Pandemic patience required. All right. So we've spent enough time talking about negative triggers. So I want to dive into this just a little bit. We won't go on too long about this, but Jen did say that because she took a nap, she was open. And it's not just all on how Jen feels, of course.
Yeah, it is.
It's been a busy weekend for me, and I didn't eat dinner, so I'm a little hungry. So we're not going to go on too long anyway. But I want to talk before we end the broadcast. I want to talk about positive triggers because I can think of several. When you're married to a woman like Jen, who's just full of light, and she's willing to share that light with me, with everyone really, but especially me. There's a lot I can talk about positive triggers. But since Glenn did the write-up, Glenn, talk about, I mean, you mentioned Japan, but what are some other positive triggers? What triggers your desires? So if you haven't been triggered by negative things, I think we pointed out the possibility of there being positive triggers. What are some of those for you, if you don't mind sharing that with us?
Very much so. Well, probably number one is that both my sons are very into it, and I'm triggered by the thought that when I go there, that they ask me to go with them, which is a pretty that's a pretty big thing to ask your parents or invite your parents to go on trips with them.
Sure.
And I think it's the thought that, yeah, I'm going to get some quality time with my children. So that's probably the major one.
Okay.
Is Japan coincidental upon that? Well, I'd say partly, but I think it's just that I think just more the enjoyment of a whole range of different experiences and taking people there as well. As you know, we take a lot of tourists there.
Sure.
So we get there's a lot of positive triggers that come from seeing the smiling faces and the positive experiences. So
sure.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So other than the country's a beautiful country, and we just have an absolute blast. Yeah, sure. We get on the sake and stuff and get a bit intoxicated, but it's fun.
Sure.
It's awesome. So
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. That was perfect. Thank you. Gosh, I could go on and on. So I'll just see what comes to mind when I talk about this. But I am triggered every day, every single day with positive triggers. And Glenn used the example of desire. That's as good as any as far as positive triggers are concerned. Every day when I wake up and I have this wonderful, beautiful, amazing, intelligent, funny person next to me, it's a positive trigger. I start my day with a positive trigger. A lot of times she'll wake up before me, and instead of a nasty alarm clock, a blaring noise or anything like that, she gently wakes me up, and before she goes to work, and I get a kiss, and she goes off and does what she needs to do, and I get up and start my day with the knowledge that this amazing person is my wife and my best friend. And that in and of itself, I don't need anything else. That's a positive enough trigger to help me get through all the difficult things that are happening in the world, and work stress, and of course I still complain sometimes about things not working out the way I want them to. But at the end of the day, they do not consume me because I have so much to draw from out of this relationship that I am blessed to have. I hope that wasn't too sappy, but as Jen said, this is the 2-year anniversary of when I asked her to marry me. And I know it's cheesy, on Valentine's Day, but I just couldn't wait anymore. And I'd have this plan cooked up for when we go to Michigan, and I still want to follow through with that, even though we're already married and it might seem silly. I still have ideas of the way I really wanted to do it. And at the time, finances and time didn't provide that opportunity. But I get to spend the rest of however long I live on this earth, I get to spend that time showing Jen, not just telling her, but showing her every day how much I love her and how much I appreciate her. That is a positive trigger for me. I have noticed that when I see the smile on her face, when I say something or do something, I light up like a Christmas tree. It's a beautiful feeling when you treat someone kindly, and especially if they're used to someone treating them with neglect and disrespect and all that, and now they've got this new thing and they love it. And Jen does love it. She eats it up, and that is just a positive trigger for me.
Yeah.
Every time she says something funny, it's a positive trigger. She's very funny, and she'll say things that just really, really make me laugh, or her reactions to things. And we have our personal stuff, the way we talk to each other and things like that. We're our childlike self are in a safe place to be able to enjoy the light of day. We don't have to just be serious all the time. And to me, that's a positive trigger. Every day we have dinner together and spend time together, and we sitting on the love seat and put our feet on a pillow, and our feet touch and our hands touch, and these are all positive triggers. Just spending time with a desirable person who's fun and accepting, and I just it's just overwhelming sometimes.
Oh, thank you, babe.
In a positive way. And I wish there were more people in my life that I could say that I react to in that way. I've never experienced anything like this where I completely trust the other person. No reservation, no holding back, no worry that she's going to leave or I'm going to say something wrong, and the next thing I get a divorce letter in my drawer underneath my clothes, and she's not there. Nothing like that. I live my life every day with no fear that that's ever going to happen. And there are other things too. I mentioned food, and I mentioned, when someone says something kind to you, it's a trigger. It reminds you of your childhood, of food, especially for me. I mentioned to Jen the other day, she's a great cook, and she'll put something in the oven or put something on the stove, and I'm working in my office, and I'm just delighted. I can smell food cooking. And I told her that I didn't use the word that's a positive trigger, but now that we're putting it in these terms, it is a positive trigger. It reminds me of some good things that happened. When I talk about my parents and my family and stuff like that, it'd be really easy to get the impression that's all bad memories. And that's not. I don't mean to make that implication. I have a lot of good memories. I have things that were delightful about my childhood, things that they did for us and with us that were wonderful. My mom was a loving person. She wasn't just bad qualities. She was a person that really cared about me. And yeah, sometimes I called her a helicopter parent before they knew what the term meant. She was sometimes controlling and wanted to do that, but I understand it came from a place of love. It really did. So she knew what things I enjoyed, and she would give that to me from time to time. And my dad is not a perfect person by any stretch, but I remember a couple of things that he used to do that I loved, and he knew I loved video games back before they had the home systems where you can just play in the living room. He would take me to an arcade just out of the blue. Big surprise. He would just take me to an arcade and give me some quarters to pop in the machines and let me play for a while. And sometimes he would even do it with me. And then later, when we had a home system, he would actually spend time with us and sit down, because I think he enjoyed it too. I think that's what it really was about. But I'm not going to I'm not going to taint the memory here. He would spend time playing video games with me. Now, it might seem like a simple thing, but it's something that triggered happiness and made me feel loved and appreciated. Also, for me, when I was a kid, we'd sit on the couch and my mom would make popcorn with melted butter, and we would watch a movie together as a family. And then as I got a little older, probably about 11 or 12, every year Christmas, we started a tradition where we'd go see a movie in the theaters together. We didn't have a whole lot of money back then, but it was something that was important. And Christmases. I love Christmas, not just because of giving gifts. I like everything about it, regardless of what people seem to say that it's pagan and all that. I'm not getting into it, but there are things about being with family. There are things about experiencing joy in the world, regardless of what else is going on, of having a period of time where it seems like people at least try to have what the Bible describes peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That I get triggered by that. It's a positive trigger for me, the idea of that. And we believe it's going to happen at some point in the future, that there'll be no more strife and war and anger and frustration. There'll be no more negative triggers. It's a utopia. And that's a positive trigger for me. I could go on, but I'll stop there. And I would like each of you, if you, Glenn already did. So, Jen, talk about some positive triggers for you, if you don't mind.
Well, I could go on and on about you, but I don't know if I can live up to all the wonderful things you said.
Happy getting engaged anniversary.
You are definitely a positive trigger for me every day in hundreds of ways. It's wonderful. And you put enough mush out there. I'm not going to add to
Okay.
it.
No, you don't have to.
I'll say a couple of mine. Christmas is one. The smells of food, the baking, the lights, the ornaments, just the message of Jesus Christ's birth, the songs, the music. Oh, it's such a positive trigger for me. Another one is, this is going to be kind of odd, but I had anytime I was fishing in the past, if I'd get a backlash, or even just any kind of knot and undoing the knot.
Yeah.
I know that really is frustrating for people, but for me, it was a positive trigger
Oh,
because I'd always picture this memory of my grandfather when he would take us fishing near their rice fields, because he was a rice farmer in Louisiana. I had this picture in my head of his tan Cajun, gnarly nailed, dirty, dirt underneath them. He would just patiently sit with his nails and his pocket knife and undo the knot. And it wasn't, he wasn't using the knife to cut the knot, but he just was so patient with getting these knots undone. So anytime I'm in that place of getting a knot out, I just think of him, and it's just such a wonderful memory, even to the point where I'll remember his smells. Like, he smoked, but he also always smelled of spearmint.
yeah.
Ooh, and he used to always give us the butterscotch lifesavers. Like, he'd buy the huge box with all the rolls, and he'd pass out the rolls to us kids when we'd go visit. So that's a positive trigger.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm outdoors, usually like the mountains, the forest, a lot of times if I'm trying to breathe and have some inner peace, I'll picture a field. And I've been in places like this before where the wind is sweeping over the grass and it looks like water. Just the smell of the outdoors, any time of year, spring, fall, winter, summer, there's like these distinct smells that just bring me joy being outside. It's just wonderful. And Believe actually mentioned the woods and also being under the stars. Being under the stars is definitely a big one for me as well.
Yes, I was going to mention that if you
Gosh, yeah, if you're out in like a place where there's no light pollution and it's just big sky and the beautiful stars, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Gosh, puzzles with family, that's another one. Love that. That's just a few, but there's so many. A lot of them have to do with like childhood, but a lot have to do with just my own heart passions. It's like nature is a big one, being an artist, and I just love nature.
Thank you. Yeah,
those are some of mine.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, just a few. That's what I was looking for. So thank you. Yeah, because a lot of the stuff it can be stressful and it can cause tension. Talking about negative triggers and all. I'm so glad Glenn put this in here, and he, rather than just taking the definition out of the Cambridge Dictionary, he went further than that. He often does, and thought about, hey, if there's negative, there's got to be positive. I think that's true about most things. There are positive and negative aspects to a lot of things that we experience. And on this broadcast, our goal is to always, when we talk about things, it's to help people, and it's to hopefully spark something in you that makes you look into your own life and say, hey, is this happening to me? And if so, what can I do to change it? And I think we've talked about some of that stuff, and hopefully you're able to think of some positive triggers for you instead of just the negative ones. And our friend John said, let me see if I can find it. Just a moment, guys. I had it here just a second ago.
What are you looking for?
Oh, comment. So I put it on the screen. Our friend John says, wow, Jason, you just triggered a memory of my dad. Every other Friday night, we would watch Kojak and have Doritos when Doritos had them huge globs of cheese in the bottom.
Whoa.
I actually remember that. I remember that one. And that I didn't realize you were that old. Kojak hasn't been on TV for a long time. I thought you were
Did
younger.
you just call somebody old? That triggered me.
I didn't. I said I didn't think you were that old, but okay. I'm sorry you're triggered. Maybe you should dig in and find the core of that, because it can't possibly be that I called anyone old.
That's funny.
Oh, that's great. That's great stuff. Well, all right. Maybe this was a bad night to choose to do the broadcast, just with the Super Bowl going on, but I have enjoyed every minute of it, and loved Glenn's write-up. There are lots of good stuff here, and I know Nez Lover commented that it's a great broadcast, and we appreciate comments like that. We always want to know how you guys feel about the broadcast, and for those of you that come quite often, you make that clear to us when you show up every week. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for all the conversations that you guys have with each other and the comments that you make. And just by the way, I wanted to mention, so Nez Lover said she's born in Birch Run, Michigan. Okay, so this will freak you out, Nez. Birch Run is right around the corner from Gladwin. Gladwin, Michigan is where my grandparents were, and that's where I spent a lot of my time growing up. So there's one to freak you out a little bit. It's very, very close to where our families live. Very familiar. Birch Run's not very big at all, and Gladwin's not much bigger. But yeah, so interesting. Love Michigan. I've always loved it, and I don't know, maybe someday we'll move there. But anyway, all right, that's it for us, guys. I'm gonna go get some dinner and spend some time with my wife.
Yay for me!
That's a line from a movie. I forget, one of the Naked Gun movies. Guy says at the end, so I'm gonna go home, and he says, I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife. It's just out of the blue. I mean, you have to, I guess, understand the context of it to get it. But anyway. All right. Well, guys, we're going to call it a night. I hope this has been beneficial to you in some way. Moving forward, we'll be back again next Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to give us any ideas you have for possible topics for broadcast, I think John mentioned doing one on creativity, and a few people in the chat seem to react to that. So we'll definitely talk.
I'd like to do that one after the ego.
Okay. Yeah. So
you can play into it.
So John, good suggestion. As always, we like to hear your suggestions. And a lot of times when you guys suggest something, we follow up with it. So thank you for that. All right. So we'll say our good nights. We'll start with Glenn. Glenn, say goodbye to the people for me, please.
Yeah, good night all. Thanks for showing up. and I, a bit like you, Cripps, I desire some food.
Yeah.
So my requirements are not much at all. So food will be good.
Thank you, Glenn.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Jen, say goodbye to the peoples, please.
Good night, peoples. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening and morning, because I think, was it John that said he's in the UK and it's 3 a.m.? Another night
Wow.
owl. Yay.
Wow.
We're so glad all of you came to hang out with us, and we're grateful for all of those who listen to the playback, and we will see you next week. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone. I'm not going to go and name everyone who is in the chat right now, but we just appreciate each and every one of you. We hope that you have a great week and hope the rest of your night goes well. Thank you for taking time to spend this time with us. I mean, we delight in you guys, and we cherish this time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. You know, we keep coming back and trying to think of topics that you guys might enjoy, or that might at least entertain you. Hopefully, especially at the beginning of this broadcast, we were really kind of cutting up and having at least for me, I thought it was a fun time. So hopefully you've had some fun, and we love you guys. All right. Until next week, have a great week. Thank you. Good night, and God bless.